I like making terrariums, but I'm broke. So let's make a terrarium that doesn't hurt my bank account. First things first, you'll need a jar. Most jars work fine, but try to stay away from jars without lids or jars and bottles with tall necks. Now, once you have chosen your jar or jars, we need to get resources. So put on your boots, grab some containers and head to your nearest park. Now, the first two resources we need to get are sand and stones. These can be found along sandbanks, but I'm borrowing it from the locals at this pond. We need these for a couple reasons. The stones for a drainage layer and the sand to give our substrate better drainage. With enough rock and sand in our pockets, we can head to our second spot, the forest. It's here, under the leaves, where we can find a nutrient-rich substrate layer filled with microfauna such as springtails that are essential to terrariums. This is due to the fact that they eat mold and detritus and poop it out as nutrients for your plants to consume. Now that you've collected enough substrate, look around, because chances are there's probably a patch of moss like this one. It is a patch of mainly fern moss, but any moss found close to the ground or in a damp environment should work well. I'm also going to use some of this moss here. I believe it's spike moss, but I'm not too sure. Moss collected, we can now find some real nice wood, hardscape. Lastly, we need to get some botanicals, like these white oak leaves and some acorn caps. Now that we have everything we need, we can head home. Since we're now home, we need to process our first resource, the rocky sand mixture. We need to separate it into rock and sand, as these two will be used for different things. These rocks are very dirty and we need them clean, so let's give them a bath. Now to create the substrate mix, you need to add the forest soil into our rocky sand mixture. This will create a substrate with good drainage while still having good water retentive properties. Now that all the preparation is complete, we can make our first terrarium. Most terrariums work best with a drainage layer. It is a space for excess water to go in case you overwater your terrarium. To make sure our drainage layer works as effectively as it should, it needs a barrier to separate it from the soil. Lots of things work well, but I'm using some dry clean moss. Once you have an even drainage layer, you can add your substrate mix. I also like to push the substrate mix to the back. This creates a sense of depth and can enlarge your terrarium. With the base of the terrarium complete, we can add our hardscape. For this, I'm using 2 pieces of slightly rotting mossy wood. Hardscape done, we can now add our plants, moss. Next, I'll be adding little bits of this oak leaf into the terrarium. You don't have to do this, but I really like how it looks and I think it gives a much more naturalistic look. They will also slowly break down into nutrients that your plants can absorb. Now for the finishing touch, I'm adding an acorn cap to the terrarium. Since this one's taller than the last, I'm going to do a slightly different design. But all terrariums start off the same, so I'm starting with a drainage layer. The only difference in the drainage layer is the drainage layer barrier, which in this one I'm using live moss. For this design, I'm going to start off with a bed of fern moss. And some more fern moss. Now to create a mini forest design, I'm poking these branches into the bed of moss. It's harder than it looks. As I said earlier, I really like to have botanicals in my terrariums, so I'm going to add some dead white oak leaves. And it's complete, let's make one more. Since you've seen me make the base terrarium 2 times already, I'm going to speedrun the last one. For the final terrarium, I'm going for a much simpler design. I want it to look like an old birch tree on some grass. All it needs now is, yes you guessed it, fern moss. I'm going to add some more botanicals because I like botanicals. Now for the finishing touch.